On September 14, 1973, General Motors unanimously voted to kill a car that had never lost its audience. The Buick Riviera GS had a 455 cubic inch engine, produced 330 horsepower, and was quicker from 0 to 60 miles per hour than a Corvette. More than 33,000 were sold each year it existed. Sales were not falling, buyers were not leaving. GM's Boldest car had simply become a problem its own corporation refused to solve. Bill Mitchell did not wait for consensus. In July 1970, as the GM styling staff debated the next Riviera, Mitchell made his intentions clear. The new car would carry a boat-tail rear, no matter what the committee thought. He scrawled his approval across the final sketches, ordering designers to channel the spirit of pre-war Delage coupes into a Buick that would look like nothing else on American roads. The official design directive, signed that August, locked in the most radical shape GM had released in a decade, a rear end that swept to a point, drawing both admiration and confusion from inside the corporation. Beneath that dramatic sheet metal, the 1971 Riviera GS arrived with numbers that did not just look bold. They were bold. The factory spec sheet listed a 455 cubic inch V8 engine rated at 330 horsepower at 4,600 RPM and 455 pound-feet of torque. Buick engineers claimed a sub-7-second sprint to 60 miles per hour, a figure that not only matched but, on paper, beat the Corvette's own acceleration. The GS was no empty gesture. It was a 4,300-pound personal luxury coupe with muscle car reflexes, able to cover the quarter mile in under 16 seconds. Mitchell's override created a car that did not fit GM's usual playbook. Its performance threatened internal boundaries, its styling broke rank with every other division, and its identity resisted the neat categories that corporate marketing depended on. The Riviera GS was born an outlier, by design, by numbers, and by the hand of the man who refused to let the committee have the last word. Buick's marketing department found itself in unfamiliar territory. The Riviera GS, with its boat-tail silhouette and muscle car numbers, refused to fit inside GM's usual categories. In early 1972, a confidential memo circulated among division heads. It described the car as a vehicle that sits between a pure luxury cruiser and a performance sports coupe, making placement in any existing sales tool difficult. That single sentence captured the confusion. Buick's own dealer bulletins split the message. One set of materials focused on plush interiors and a quiet ride, while another played up 330 horsepower and the car's ability to out-accelerate the Corvette. Sales staff were handed dual-track scripts, sell it as a gentleman's express or as a bruiser in a dinner jacket, depending on the customer. Inside GM, this ambiguity became a source of friction. The Riviera's refusal to play by the rules left it exposed. Without a clear identity, the car was vulnerable to shifting priorities and budget decisions from above. Marketing managers grumbled about the impossibility of defining the GS, too fast for the country club set, too refined for the drag strip, and too distinctive to be lumped in with Buick's other offerings. The 1972 directive to keep advertising both tracks was less a strategy than an admission. Nobody at GM could agree on what the Riviera was supposed to be. That confusion would soon become a liability, especially as outside pressures and internal rivals started looking for easy targets. Insurance companies didn't miss the Riviera GS's numbers. In 1972, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety placed the car in its highest risk class, citing high horsepower and a rear-heavy chassis. For male drivers under 30, the annual insurance surcharge hit $340. That was 40% higher than what the same demographic paid to insure a Corvette. That single figure, buried in actuarial tables and echoed in dealer complaints, turned the Riviera from a performance bargain into a financial headache for its core audience. Letters to Buick's customer service office from that year mentioned buyers shocked to find their insurance costs outpacing their monthly car payments. But the pain wasn't only coming from outside. Inside General Motors, the Riviera GS was now a political target. In July 1972, Chevrolet's product planning office sent a memo to General Motors Central Management. The subject line was blunt: Riviera GS eroding Corvette sales. The memo, signed by Chevrolet's Vice President of Product Planning, warned that the Riviera was pulling buyers aged 55 to 65 away from the Corvette, especially in the Midwest. The language was direct. Request General Motors corporate review the Riviera's pricing and positioning to protect the Corvette's market share. No directive followed, but the message landed. Within General Motors' walls, the Riviera was no longer just an oddball, it was a threat to an established flagship. Insurance analysts and Chevrolet executives, each for their own reasons, wanted the Riviera boxed in. The insurance surcharge made it harder to sell to the young and ambitious. The internal memo made it harder for Buick to defend the car's existence at all. These pressures didn't kill the Riviera overnight, but they drained its momentum. By the end of 1972, the car was caught between outside costs it couldn't control and inside rivals who wanted it tamed or gone. The next blow would come not from the market, but from the budgeting office upstairs. March 1973 brought a decision that would seal the Riviera's fate, not in a boardroom brawl or a dramatic press release, but in a finance memo. The General Motors Finance Committee set a hard ceiling, $300,000 for Buick to bring the Riviera's rear bumper into compliance with the new federal 5 miles per hour impact standard. That number was not just tight, it was surgical. It came down from above as a fixed line item, with the warning that any overrun would be charged against Buick's own profit and loss. There was no room for a creative solution, no allowance for the car's signature shape. The sum was calculated to force a compromise, not to preserve what made the Riviera stand out. Inside Buick's engineering offices, the frustration was open. One unnamed engineer later said that the budget was the exact amount needed to do the job wrong. The committee's message was clear: comply, but do not expect to save the boat tail. The technical fallout was immediate. With only $300,000, the team could not retool the rear structure or integrate the bumper cleanly. Instead, they had to settle for a crude add-on, heavier, boxier, and a visual insult to the original design. The new bumper added weight, raised the rear ride height, and stripped the car of its sleekness. The boat tail, once the Riviera's signature, became a casualty of the balance sheet. There was no debate, no appeal. The finance directive did not just limit options, it made destruction the only affordable path. The engineer's indictment, preserved in a 1987 transcript, lingers as a quiet accusation. The car was not engineered out of existence, it was budgeted out. The numbers told the story, and for the Riviera's designers, the verdict arrived with a stamp and a dollar sign. GM's own wind tunnel records told a story the boardroom never wanted public. The 1973 Riviera, forced to wear its new 5 miles per hour rear bumper, picked up 68 pounds at the tail and rode 1.4 inches higher at the rear axle. The drag coefficient, once a respectable 0.42, now measured 0.46, a measurable aerodynamic penalty. John M. Hargrove, head of the aerodynamics department, signed the internal memo with a note: classified, internal use only, potential competitive disadvantage. Officially, the numbers never left the building, yet the market, supposedly the judge of success, did not flinch. Production for the boat-tail Riviera held steady: 33,810 cars in 1971, 33,728 in 1972, and 34,080 in 1973. GM's own sales analysis found less than 2% variance year to year. The supposed sales collapse was not there. Buyers kept coming even as the car's shape became more controversial and its engineering edge dulled by forced compromises. But inside the product planning committee, technical proof and steady sales were not enough. On September 14, 1973, the committee met to review the fate of the boat tail. Bob L. Miller, Buick's vice president of product planning, presented a cost sheet listing rising compliance expenses, the drag penalty, and a $300,000 budget overrun. Chief engineer Harold C. Ward argued that the boat tail was the car's identity, its reason for being. The minutes record his warning. Its removal will erode brand identity. The board did not hesitate. The vote to approve a conventional rear for 1974 was unanimous. The boat tail was finished, and the 1973 model would be quietly marketed as the last of its kind. The 1974 Riviera arrived 400 pounds heavier, stripped of the GS badge and with none of the old car's presence. Car and Driver's December review did not mince words, a step backward for Buick's identity. The magazine cut its rating to 3 out of 5. Enthusiasts noticed. By 2024, restored boat-tail Rivieras were bringing $35,000 to $55,000 at auction, 10 times their original price. The market that never left the car behind became its final vindication. The institution that built the Riviera was the one that killed it. Today, the boat-tail Riviera stands as proof that boldness can threaten even a giant's comfort zone. General Motors' own records show a car outpacing the Corvette, yet it was sacrificed to protect hierarchy. When institutions fear their best ideas, progress stalls, and the cost isn't just measured in lost horsepower. What do you think?